Okay. Welcome to Good Design İzmir 7 Vital Edition. Now we are hosting Federica Fragapane from Italy, and she's the guest keynote speaker of İzmir Italian Consulate here in Turkey. Welcome, Federica. It's so nice to see you with us, and we really wanted to host you physically, and we wish that we can do it hopefully next year. And I must say that I met a fan of yours today, and this person, I don't know if she's here. She's been following you for a long time, so you have fans, and I was really happy and excited to hear that. So now we will have this talk in Zoom, but also we are streaming this Zoom edition in our culture part where the physical exhibition goes on. So there are some people there as well, listening to you from the screen, and there might be questions coming from the hall. There might be questions coming from Zoom, and also we have a group watching you from YouTube. So your talk here is in Zoom. It is translated to Turkish as well. So if you have any Turkish questions, you can use the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen, and you can hear it in English. Okay. But usually we take the questions in the written format. And for the audience, we don't have the Zoom webinar edition. So we want you to write the questions in the chat box on the right, okay? We don't have the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Of course, that will be at the end of the talk. Sorry for the technical issues. Now, we can start. I will start with introducing you to Federica Fragapane. Well, she's an information designer, visual communication designer, and she studied at Politecnico di Milano. And the title of her speech is Living Shapes, Designing Visual Data Narratives. She is an independent information designer collaborating with organizations and the world of publishing. She visually translates contents using shapes and visual elements and design data visualizations. As an information designer, she constantly explored the possibilities that designing a data visualization opens in terms of creating a connection with the people. Her main purpose is communicating about subjects and helping them to be understood. The aim of the design process behind many of her projects is to engage the readers, inviting them to read her pieces and therefore to explore the information and stories that she's telling through them. Visual experimentation has a significant role in such research. During her talk, she will show the process behind a set of data visualizations designed to engage the readers and help them to explore subjects in their complexity. Every piece tells a unique story. The content is presented by overlaying multiple layers of information so as to allow the reader to choose how to explore the visualization and the depth of the analysis. Every visualization is the result of a multi-step design process, research of the topic and the data analysis, design of the visual model, and visual refinements. Usage context has a significant role in her design approach. She will talk about how often work on pieces that can be read, taking the proper time to do it because the usage context allows it, with a slow reading approach. She will also explain how designing visualizations is similar to the writing process. She writes with visual alphabets and often experiments with new visual letters. For this reason, it is extremely important to provide the readers with all the tools to use these alphabets. This is why a clear legend is essential, and this is always present in her pieces. Furthermore, she thinks that as with writing, the choice of the visual words is meaningful. She often works with organic and soft shapes. This is one definition of organic by Oxford Dictionary, relating to or derived from living matter. Drawing organic visual elements helps her to make the living behind the numbers visible. Sharing information accurately to help people understand intricate topics is very important, possibly now more than ever. She believes that designing an engaging visualization can play a role in including more readers in the conversations around such topics. Well, thank you for such rich work that we will now hear Federica. Thank you, Federica, again for coming.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for me. I also hope that I will see you in person next year or soon. So I'm sharing the screen, so just let me know if you can see it properly, just to double check. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Federica Fragapane and I'm an independent information designer. So during the years, I've collaborated with the United Nations, Google, BBC, Scientific American, and La Lettura, that is the cultural supplement of the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera, and I will talk about La Lettura soon. And I'm also co-author of 2 books. One is a children's book published by National Geographic Kids and White Star, in which I combine illustrations and small infographics to talk about our planet to children. And the other one that's been only published in Italy, and it's an atlas dealing with water-related topics and using cartography and data visualization and text to explore different subjects such as water grabbing, the human right to water, virtual water, and so on. And just to give you a very quick overview of my path, I started approaching data visualization design during my studies at Politecnico di Milano. I studied communication design there, and during my last year there, I attended the density design course, and density design is a research lab within the Politecnico with a focus on information design and data visualization. Then I started an internship at Accurate. Accurate is an information design agency based in Milan and New York. And I worked there for a few years, and it was a very inspiring and very helpful experience, a great experience for me. And then in 2015, I started working as a freelancer, mainly because I was curious to see how my career would have evolved taking this direction. And this is my current situation. So I'm a freelancer, an independent designer. And I want to show you a few projects, some projects of mine, but mainly the process and the reasons behind them. And you will see that the range of complexity that characterize my projects is very broad according to the needs, the readers, and the usage context. And I will talk about these aspects. But in general, what I'm interested in exploring is this communication connection that a data visualization piece can create with the people I'm talking to. I'm very interested into exploring this connection and to see how the visual translations I work on can help me in reaching that. So this is what I do. I visual translate numerical qualitative data, numbers, but also stories into visual representations in order to make them more readable and also more accessible to potential readers. I want to show you, as was mentioned, a few examples. And the first one is the visualizations, are the visualizations that I designed for La Lettura. So La Lettura, as I was mentioning, is a cultural magazine, an Italian cultural magazine. And I work with them exploring and communicating different topics, social, cultural, environmental topics. And there are always 2 aspects about La Lettura I have to mention. And the first one is on the usage context, an aspect I was already quickly mentioning before. So La Lettura is a cultural magazine. It's published during the weekends. And those are the photographs, the pictures that La Lettura's readers most commonly post on social media. So a pic of La Lettura next to a cup of tea or a coffee or a brioche in a context that suggests as reading La Lettura is a slow process, part of a lazy and relaxing Sunday morning. And having in mind the context has a very important impact to my design approach. I know that I can work on pieces that need more time to be read because I know that readers have such a time. It would be very different to create something for a daily newspaper, for instance. The second aspect is that for this kind of projects, I'm asked to visual experiment while providing meaningful contents at the same time, of course. And so the intersections of these two requests allows me to visual experiment a lot with the aim of engaging the readers and inviting them and catching their glance and their attention. And this is the design process that characterizes my projects. At first, I select the topics and sources. I often propose the topics, and it is something that I really enjoy doing. Then I work on the data analysis phase. And finally, I design a custom visual model, a custom visualization. And I want to show you a practical example. So some time ago, I worked on data. I proposed to visualize CO2 emissions data. And this was the table I was starting from. I often start from a table such as this one. And I had a list of countries, and for each country, I had the information on the CO2 emissions by year. And after having analyzed the data, for me, a very important step is the visual inspiration one. So I really spend a lot of time looking for visual inspiration, not only when I have to start a new project, but almost every day. And I really love to fill my eyes and my minds with elements that can help me in creating new visual structures, new visual languages. And in this case, I found this image and I really liked it visually. And I also found it slightly creepy. And I like the idea of this mix of feelings. So I always look for inspiration after having studied the data, because at that point, I already know more or less the macrostructure that I can work on and the visual elements that I can replicate. So in this case, after having analyzed the data and looked for inspiration, I decided I created a set of rules to apply to my visualization. And I'm going to show you the rules. So for each country, I decided to show a set of years of CO2 emissions. And as you can see here, each radius is a year. And then I visualize, inspired by that image, the CO2 emissions data that is represented as the length of a petal. And then after having visualized the length of the petals for all the years and all the countries, I worked a lot, very in detail, on the gradient and the overall look and feel, the colors and the textures, because I think that working in detail on these aspects, on these visual aspects, can really help me in having an engaging connection with the people I'm talking to. And when I work on this kind of projects, I usually overlay different layers of information to give the readers the possibility of looking at the topic I'm talking about with different deepnesses of analysis. So here, the first narrative layer is given by the length of the petal that shows the tons of CO2 emitted. And then I added another one that is the color. Here, the color shows the change in emissions over the previous year, red for increased emissions and blue for decreased ones. So I'm not providing a new data, but I'm creating a visual guide to further look into the insights, into the pattern of data. So if a country is completely red or completely blue, for instance, it's already an information that I'm helping in extrapolating. And finally, I added a new data, another layer of information, that is the renewable energy consumption, represented as as percentage of the total final energy consumption. And I show this information as two sized circles, one for 1992 and one for 2012. So it's more a detail of an information. And this is the final piece in which you can see I applied my rules to all the countries that I had. There are a few aspects that I have to mention. So first of all, as you can see, there are some elements that can quickly be seen, such as the size of certain countries or the predominance of certain colors. And keeping this aspect is very important. But there are also elements that need more time to be read in a kind of slow reading connection that, as I was saying before, it's very related to the specific usage context of this medium. Then there is a legend on the top left corner, and I will talk about very soon about the importance of providing a clear legend. And there is a text. A misconception of this field a few years ago was thinking that a good infographic doesn't need text to be read, to be understood. But I don't agree at all, because we learn how to read at schools, but we don't learn how to read graphics. And I think that even in the simplest graphics, those are complex ones, but even in the simplest graphics, I think it's very important to provide the readers with all the tools to read them. And I cannot take for granted that they are going to know how to read them, because maybe simply they are not, because they are not used to them. Plus, in the text, I can explain with intellectual honesty my presence. So for instance, if I'm selecting 40 countries, I can explain why I selected those countries. What is the selection criteria? It can be the top 40 countries for CO2 emissions in the most recent year, for instance. So this is why it's very important to combine written words and visual words. And for me, doing this comparison with writing with written words and visual alphabets is something that I do pretty often. For me, it's really like writing with these visual languages. And I often experiment with new visual letters. And this is why, as I was mentioning, it's very important to provide the readers with all the tools to use such alphabets. And this is why creating a legend is essential. And I dedicate a lot of time to the visual explanation of the project, explaining with very short sentences what each single element represents and how to read them. And after having designed visualizations and legends, for me, it's very important to test them. And my parents are my favorite testers. So those are all messages I used to send to my mom, because my dad has a smartphone that is too old, but he is a very good tester too. And they're my favorite testers because they are not data visualization experts, and therefore they represent the majority of my potential readers. So I don't want to only be able to speak to my colleagues. I'm not particularly interested in that, even if I'm glad if my colleagues look at my works, but I'm talking to people who are not in my field. And so for me, it's very important to send to potential testers screenshots to the legend and to the visualization. And sometimes my parents come back to me saying, I'm not really understanding this part. Can you please explain it better? And this is very, very helpful for me. And in the last years, I've had a chance to work on a very wide range of projects for La Lettura. I'm just showing them quickly this time. This was a visualization on the letters written by Vincent van Gogh to his brother, Theodorus. They had an intense epistolary relationship and personal relationship. This visualization shows the 50 most violent cities in the world, for instance. This is a visualization on the epistolary relationship again, this time between Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And as you can see, and I want to talk about it, aesthetics has an important role for me. I spend a lot of time curating in detail the aesthetics of my pieces and also trying to visually experiment. And this is not only because I like pretty things. It's not just a final visual refinement, even if I like pretty things and I enjoy looking at pretty things. But this is because I really think that aesthetics for me is really part of the communication process I'm working on. I really aim at engaging people, and I really aim at inviting them to read my pieces, to look at them, and therefore to read the stories that I'm telling through these visual elements. And I think that as in writing, also in data visualization, the choice of visual words has a role in communicating stories, as in writing, the choice of written words. And I often use organic elements, and this is the definition of organic from Oxford Languages, relating to or derived from living matter. I think that working on organic shapes can really help me reminding myself first and then the readers of the living behind the data. And I often work on data that have people and a living behind them. This visualization, for instance, shows patterns of violence for Brazil's land defenders. It visualizes the average proportion and number of environmental defender deaths in Brazil from 2015 to 2019 by state. And it was commissioned by Atmos magazine, an online magazine. And they asked me to use my organic style because they wanted to remind of the living behind the data and the story that they were telling through these numbers. And to keep on talking about shapes that have and numbers that have human stories behind them. Some time ago, I worked on a project that it's called Key Workers. And I was contacted, it started in April 2020. I was contacted by a think tank that it's called ODI, and they were doing something very interesting. They were collecting stories of migrant contributions to COVID-19 response, to the COVID-19, migrant essential workers' contribution to the COVID-19 response in the first weeks of the pandemic. And it was a personal initiative of Marta Foresti. She's director of ODI Europe, and at the time, and she wanted to start collecting these stories. And these are stories of contribution of migrants, but also on initiatives recognizing and supporting such contribution. And they were started creating this data set that now it's online and everybody can look at it. And it's a data set in which each row is a story, and then the stories are categorized by geography, so by macro geographical area, then by country, and then by level, such as national, regional, or local level. And then they also categorize them by sector. So, for instance, agriculture or healthcare or food. And they also added some contextual data and contextual information. And when they contacted me, they already had a good amount of stories, but they weren't satisfied with this table because they thought that it wasn't communicating enough what they wanted to show, what they wanted to talk about. So these stories of contribution. And I accepted the work very gladly because they asked me to visualize it. And starting from the concept of contribution, I started working on some sketches and thinking about this contribution concept. Those were my first drafts. In these first drafts, my idea was to represent the stories as some curved lines. So here, each curved line is a story, and then they are connected to their geographical location. And then the idea was that clicking on the line, you could read all the additional information on it. And even if ODI likes the look and feel of these drafts, the problem of these drafts, there was a problem, and the problem was that here looks like these contributions are coming from an abstract point from the top of the page, while those are contributions from people who are already there, who were already there, and who were contributing maybe for years. What was growing wasn't their contribution, but was our awareness of it. And this really helps me in talking about how the visual shapes we use to talk about stories can really have an impact. The visual words that I use can really have an impact in how the story is then perceived. And so I changed idea. I proposed another concept, starting on this concept of something that grows from within, and also starting from the concept that what is growing is our awareness of it. And I proposed a very simple concept that is the tree one. And so I proposed ODI to work on this concept of growing trees. And in this case, they accepted the idea and very gladly. And so after having done some researches, I proposed the final look and feel on the project and the final concept and the final visualizations. So this project is the result of a collaboration. It has been co-designed with Alex Piacentini. Alex Piacentini, you can find his name here. It's a UX UI designer and developer. And so working with him was essential because we combined our competencies. And in this draft, as you can see, each tree represents a geographical area, such as North America, Latin America, Africa, and so on. And then the larger branches shows sectors, such as healthcare or agriculture. The smaller ones shows the different levels, so national or local or regional level. And then each red dot is a story. And the website allows to explore such stories. In the home page, you can see all the trees, one for geographical area, and then interacting with them allows to read them. And the purpose of the website wasn't to prove something in particular or to force, for instance, a specific order. They just wanted a page in which the readers could lose themselves, just exploring and reading the stories without a specific hierarchy or order in mind. So clicking on the geographical area, for instance, you can see the screen split into halves, and you can see always a tree, and then on the right part, you can see a map with all the stories plotted geographically, and also above the map, the stories categorized by sector. And the vertical line that you can see in the middle is also a timeline. So when you click on the story, you can also see their temporal position. And then, of course, clicking on the story allows to read it. And ODI teams brought short sentences describing these initiatives. And we also added a small map, some contextual information, and the possibility of clicking read more to go to the original source. It could be an article or a paper or a research and so on. And the website allows to explore such stories by different geographical area and also by sector. And as you can see, those are images from more than 1 year ago. So some of the trees were really small, but actually these trees then kept on growing and actually are still growing, because what we did was uploading new stories periodically. At first it was once a month, then once each couple of months. And I really like the aspect of trees full, the more as the time passed by, that we're going to be more and more full of new stories and new fruits showing this contribution. And I really love working on data visualization pieces that can help me in giving a shape to stories that sometimes are hidden or are not very known by readers and by the people I'm talking to. And this is why I worked, considering that I really think that data visualization has a strong communicative potential. I also feel the responsibility to use it as a tool to talk about important topics. And this is why some years ago I worked on this project. That is the last project that I want to talk about. And this is a personal project without any commission. And it started because I had some years ago, my boyfriend met an asylum seeker who was arrived in Turin, that is the city I live in. And talking with my boyfriend, this asylum seeker started to tell him about his journey. He was coming from Somalia, his journey from Somalia to Italy. And he talked a lot about everything that stands before the Mediterranean Sea route. That is the route that I'm thinking about Italian media, but it's the part that many Italian media most frequently mention. But there are also thousands of kilometers before that part and hundreds of days spent traveling. And so I started to think about how I would like to tell these stories of asylum seekers' journeys using data visualization as a tool to talk about them. And I also started to think that I wanted to talk about these stories, sharing the experience of the people who lived such journeys. And then I had this idea in my mind for a long time. And then some months later, I went to a welcoming center in my hometown, that is Vercelli. It's 1 hour from Turin. There was an event hosted there. And I started to talk in an informal way about this idea with a volunteer who works there. And she told me that she loved the idea and that she had already in mind a group of people who could have participated to the project. So in this case, the narrators choose me and not the opposite way. And this is how I met MB, SS, MD, AL, SG, and TK. They are 6 asylum seekers arrived in Italy in 2016, in Vercelli in 2016. And my idea was to give a perceivable shape to their life experience. So I met them, we had some interviews, and during our meetings, what I did was to reconstruct the routes point by point using Google Maps to help us. And then for each point, for each city, I asked them always the same questions. How many days they traveled to get there, which was the transportation, and how many days they moved there before, they stayed there before moving to the following place. Plus, I added that I would have noted down any personal notes and comments that they would have liked to add to their story, to their narrative, but just when they wanted to. And this data collection process, of course, was completely different from the ones that I'm used to, because I usually look for data sets online. But in this time, I really wanted to exit from the digital world in which I'm too immersed sometimes, to talk with the people who live the topic every day, to understand it more deeply. And I also was a little bit, because I think that data visualizations, at first I was a little bit intimidated by the topics, by the dramatic stories, but I really believe that data visualization can help not only to communicate to people, but also to give a voice to people who don't have a platform to share their experiences. I also was a little bit intimidated by the fact that I wasn't I wanted to talk about a very global topic, a complex topic, using very simple and personal data. But this is so days spent traveling, transportation, and so on. But this is because I really wanted to provide a clean, personal, and simple and rational narrative of this topic. And I think that is a topic that deserves a rational approach. And I'm thinking again about Italian media. Sometimes they tend to use a spectacularization of the topic that undermines a clean narrative, a clear narrative of it. So after our meetings, I started working on the visualizations, and I knew that I wanted to work on the six personal lines. All of these experiences are unique, so I wanted them to be shaped by the lived experiences. And then I added some data, the data that I was asking them. So the days spent traveling represented as two horizontal lines, a blue line for days of stay in the city, and a light blue one for the days spent traveling. I also added the information of the transportation as different dashed lines. And the final result is a website. It's called storiesbehind-the-line.com. And also this project is the result of a collaboration with Alex Piacentini. He's not only a colleague of mine, but he's also a friend. And when I proposed to work on this project in our spare time, because again, we didn't have a client, he accepted. And he helped me in developing it and in working on the UX/UI of the project. So in the landing page, you can see the 6 lines with the initials of the 6 narrators. And then clicking on them, you can see the narrators page. Every single story is unique. And so I wanted the first thing to be a black line on a white background to give their stories their own space. And then clicking on data, it's possible to see the days data visualized, and going over with the mouse, you can read the days, and you can also read the transportation information. And the red dots represents the moment in which the narrators decided to share a more detailed fragments from their stories, and so clicking on them allows to read them. And then I also wanted to show the map behind the line, but I wanted it to be a second moment. I wanted it to be an element of surprise, because for instance, you see how the Mediterranean Sea route, that thinking about, again, Italian media most frequently mentioned, it's only a small part of a very long journey. So I wanted it to be a discover made in a second moment. And so yes, as I was mentioning, this is the Mediterranean Sea route, and you can see. So I really wanted the readers at first to see the line and then to see it contextualized on the geographical map. And then I also worked on a second view called distances, in which I stretched the line to a vertical path, showing the travel kilometers in the days spent traveling. So further rationalizing the stories and having this very clean visualization. So this project talks about a global topic using personal and small stories. And I think that it can be important to combine both of them. Big data in order to provide the overall picture and to show the overall picture and help readers in understanding it. But I think that also providing such small windows from which to look at the subject can help readers and people in having a deeper comprehension of it, without losing sight of the humanity behind the data, behind the numbers, and behind the topic. And I think that empathy and rationality aren't necessarily in a position. I think that a rational approach doesn't undermine an empathic approach too. And I think also that the narrator's comment really helped me also in having this, adding this additional emotional component to the project. So for instance, a beautiful comment is the one from SG, 26-year-old boy, who at the end of our meeting told me, "My mind is quiet now. I'm quiet because I'm safe, and that's why I love Italy." And another beautiful comment is from AEL, a 17-year-old boy at the time, who told me, "You have a beautiful life here because you know that you are safe." So it was a project I really loved working on. And visually, it's very different from the ones that I show you also. And it's not only because I wanted to have such a different approach, but it also was a way to pay homage to the narrator style. So also the narrator styles was incredibly clean and minimal and rational and quiet, while telling me very dramatic experiences. And I also wanted to pay homage to it visually. So not only sharing their words, but also the way in which they told me such words. So this is to conclude my talk. So as you can see, I talked about projects that are very different from each other in terms of visual elements, contents, and also usage context they're immersed into. But what is the common ground for me is this connection that I'm hoping to create with the readers. And it's also this using data visualization as a tool and exploring it and working on it, experimenting it when I can to talk to people and to share stories and to help people in understanding topics, and sometimes in having a platform and a voice. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Federica. I don't know what to say, you know, like I'm so touched. I mean, such detailed thinking behind everything you do. I mean, it's very reflective. It's political. It is vital. It is everything is, and it's starting with these numbers and how they are translated into these beautiful organic shapes, and how this organic life is translated into this more pure, simple lines. I am like speechless, really. I loved it so much, and I'm really happy that there are many people watching you, and it's a lesson for also students also to see this, because what you're doing is it is quite mind shifting for designers, for the people. Also, as you say, you try to communicate with the people. It's very reflective, and it is narrative. It's a visual narrative. Thank you so much. It was a fantastic presentation. I'm really excited to see it. And let me look at the chat box. If
thank you so much for your words. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us here. Okay, now we have 3 different places. So there can be questions within the Zoom. There can be questions in the audience in the hall, and there can be questions from YouTube. So let me check them. And okay, any questions from the audience, or with the chat box? No.
Maybe there is one from the room. Sorry? I see that there is someone who in the room who is standing in front of the webcam. So I'm wondering if
no, yeah, she's from our group. So she's checking with us. No, she's not. Oh, I'm sorry. To check, is there a question in the hall? Is that you, Çiçek?
Yes,
no.
We have a question from the hall.
Yes, we have. Yes. Sorry, you were right. Sorry, my mistake.
Geç geliyor herhalde, görmediler.
Yes, sorry.
Şuraya mı? Thank you so much for the inspiring presentation. I was wondering, you know, like the graphic design methods are like all softwares are getting developed so advanced right now. And for instance, I use Obsidian. I don't know if you're familiar with the software, and it has this like very nice graphic visualization. Do you use any kind of software like this, or what do you think about them?
I actually am not familiar with it. I always use Adobe Illustrator for the static pieces, and then when I work on interactive. No, I'm not familiar with it. No, actually, because I work on Illustrator, and then for interactive pieces, I work with the developers and I give them some pieces maybe drawn by me on Illustrator, and then they make them interactive. So no. But if you want
Canva?
another,
because I know that Canva has a lot of great templates that like I heard that like people, it's getting popular. Do you like,
Canvas.
what do you think about this generative? I mean, people started to use this like inauthentic, I would say, graphic designs. I mean, the art part may be kind of lost. You might just, you know, read like that.
I think that
like everyone is like mass adoption of this kind of methods, softwares. I don't know, maybe you are the professional. I mean, I would only, you know, comment on this from my perspective. But that's what I see, because people, there is another question that Ekin has, which like related to generative art part, I guess. Was it like that?
She's using like, she can collect all this data and use it in generative.
Oh, okay. If you use those data and if you can use from the create a generative art, for instance, from the data, like what do you think about that? You know, that's the current trend nowadays. Do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a strong opinion. I'm not particularly interested in the generative art field, also because maybe I don't have, I mean, I don't code, so I'm more interested in creating something that can be readable and can communicate something that then people can read, even if there are some generative art pieces that are beautiful to look at, and I don't have anything against them, but I'm more interested in not only creating art, but creating something that can tell stories. And so this is what interests me the most, even if I enjoy looking at generative art pieces, but it's not something that I particularly work on, if it answers to the questions. And as for Canva, it's not a tool that I use. I think that the things that I do are very difficult to achieve with tools such as Canva, for instance. And I don't have a strong opinion on that neither. I mean, I'm glad if people can have a grasp of what graphic design is, even if they're not graphic designers. Then I think that it's right to make a distinction between professionals and people who do it with the tools that are available, but not because I have, again, anything against the non-professional things, but then in order to create a certain kind of projects, you need professionals. So I think that it's important to distinguish between the two categories. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have studied in a design university. It just means that you have to have studied anywhere and read books, did experience, and so on.
Okay, I will go there's a line going on. First of all, Yaşayan, the team creator, says thank you so much for this inspiring presentation. And then there is a question from Daniela Sevasta. You can see there are students in Yaşayan University, I think, now, visual communication design. They are watching you. They have a question. And then there will be other questions. There is two more from Tuğcan, Güler, and Yaşayan. First, Daniele, we don't hear you. Are you writing?
Oh, they cannot unmute themselves.
Okay, I am going to, okay. Okay. Daniele? Bahar Hanım, could you please, Bahar Hanım, Daniele.
Okay.
Okay. Tamam. Okay, there is sound, too much sound.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah, at first that work was very inspirational. I want to thank you for your presentation in the first. And my question was like something I think more personal. Those immigration problems are happening in the Turkey right now, and I grew up in this place that, that kind of people were in the, let's say they are not less than the Turkish people. And I wanted to know that how this projects affected your opinion on this stuff, because I know people are, having hard feelings against some, in some sense, against these people. And I want to know if, like, anyone in particular, like, changed their opinions when they see this.
So if my project changed other people's opinion, or yeah, so, and mine, you also asked. So the project didn't change. Okay, so no, it didn't change my opinion, but I learned things that I wasn't aware of. So they talked about details from this different parts of the traveling stories that I wasn't aware of. So it had a personal impact of me, definitely. I don't personally know people who changed their mind because of the project, but I know people who wasn't expecting to see such long distances. For instance, I brought the project to some events, like events in Italy, but also conferences abroad. And for instance, I remember some events in Italy where there was a screen and people just then walked past by the screen and they used to interact with it. And many people there was very surprised when they clicked on map to show the map behind the lines, because they were expecting something like a shorter route, for instance. So I'm not sure if it changed their opinion, but I know that they discovered something new. They discovered something that they weren't aware of. So for me, it's already a good starting point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Now we can go to the next question. Daniele, is that fine? Any other questions from there? No. Okay, thanks a lot. I feel like a media person or something like that. So we have different halls and they are watching us. It's so nice. Okay, Tuğcan Güler, he's a graphic designer. He has a question, one quick question. Would you describe the medium of your projects? I think some of them designed for a printed medium. Yes, we would like to understand. Also, I can maybe add one more thing. For example, when you are working with a UX UI designer, are you giving also any hints like how you want them to interact? Okay, but first, please, with to John's question, it just fitted. I wondered about this as well. Maybe you can add it.
Yeah, sure. So the static pieces, almost all of them are for printed magazines. So La Lettura is printed, for instance. When I worked for BBC, it was a printed magazine. The one on Brazil, it was online. It was static, but it was for a magazine online. And so I designed it in different versions. One for mobile, for instance, one for desktop, and then they also asked me something for social media. So in that case, I work on different formats, thinking about the ways in which people are going to look at them online. So yes, but many of the static ones are from printed. And also I wasn't expecting, when I started this career, I wasn't expecting to work so much on print. But I'm glad that I did, because it's a medium that I love to work on. And then the ones that you were asking when I work with UX UI designer, of course, yes. Then Alex is also a friend, so we have a very direct dialogue constantly, and this is super helpful, being able to be direct with the people you work with. And so we really brainstorm a lot together. It's really a process we work on together, and we think together about, I propose then the ways in which I would like people to interact with the visualizations. For instance, I propose him to split the screens into halves, the ones with the tree, and then you worked on the visual refinements on all the UX UI. So yes, we really work a lot together on the projects.
Thank you. And we have a question from Shalankipos. I wonder how you collaborate with other field of studies and disciplines for collecting data on topics such as ecology, social patterns, etc. And also I can add to this, I'm finding ways for my questions. I just recently saw about the Iranian protests, for example, that I think it's your recent work, maybe like, as an example, I'm putting it because it's very recent. Also, I saw in your website.
Yeah, sure. Also, let me open it maybe while we are, and so I can also share it too. I'm sorry, I will share my Instagram profile, but it's the quickest way to share the project.
It's okay for you.
So yeah. So for the collaboration part, yes, definitely, and it's also extremely interesting for me. So, for instance, I mentioned the atlas on water-related topics. That was the result of a collaboration with a cartographer who designed the map. Because I designed the visualizations, a cartographer designed the maps, but then a journalist who has a focus on environmental topics and on water was one of the authors and also a researcher. So they had a huge role in finding the data, working on the stories with us. So definitely. Also, for instance, the visualization on the environmental defender's death was the result of a collaboration. Yesenia Funes, she's the author of, because the piece was part of a long article written by her, a huge and very great reporting by her on the topic. And so also in that case, were a result of a collaboration. So definitely ODI, the trees projects, they have a focus on immigration as a topic, for instance, and we work a lot together on the data and then on the stories. So it's definitely the result of collaborating with people who have different competencies, and this is why I think it's particularly interesting for me. And also the project that you mentioned that is super recent is this one. And it's something that I designed it last week, Monday or Tuesday, I think, because I was keeping on reading the stories and the news on the protests in Iran. And in this case, again, it was a personal initiative. I wanted to do something also because that morning I started seeing Instagram stories from a colleague of mine from Iran, and she was sharing stories from other people, asking other people around the world to talk about the subject, to share stories about it, to be vocal about it. And so in the morning, I remember I saw those stories online and on Instagram, and then I decided that I wanted to do something. And I had this image, this idea of the hair, because of course we know that they are cutting their own hair. And so it's an image that I had in mind. And then I went to a source, an official source that they on human rights, a Norwegian organization who works in Iran, and I found the data of the people who had been killed since the beginning of protests, and so I decided to visualize it. And it was really a personal necessity working on something like that. And what really surprised me, and I just did it and I posted it online, it really was shared a lot by a lot of people. And then from the hashtags, it reached a lot of people from Iran. And I was very, very honored to see how much they shared it. And so, and something that they kept on writing was, be our voice, please be our voice. And so also visualizing stories this way, can be really a way to share stories, and in this way to be the voice of people who have difficulties in sharing their experience. So I want to keep on working on this. I want to update it because it's not something that is finished with these numbers. So I would like to see the updated numbers that unfortunately are growing, and to keep on using again what I can do to be vocal about something that is important now. But thank you for mentioning it.
it's because also, I mean, you're a freelance designer, and there are works that are asked to you. There are already maybe collaborations, they invite you, and also you have some personal interests and a point of view how you can really contribute and also engage people, and you are also enriching the people to make them, helping them to talk to each other as well, and to with this latest work to strengthen them visually as well in their lives. There are two thanks from Daniela Savasta and to John, so they are thanking you as well. Let me see if there are other questions, but I have a small word because I was thinking about it, because when you started with the numbers, because you usually, I mean, it looked like this Excel sheets and numbers. Your work is static, but it is not static. You know, the data is changing all the time, and it is, we saw that when it is like on the website, UX, UI, yes, you add, and with this work, you said with the hair, I hope that hair does not grow, by the way. I mean, that hair stays like that. Of course, that's our wish, but the data is changing. So, and your works are usually with the numbers, like they're very organic. It's like it's going to grow, but it is not. So there is, I really wondered about if there is also a detailed thinking about this and this growth. If you can mention, it would be happy.
Yeah, definitely. For me, working on this soft, more, organic shapes, it's also a way to make the data less static and absolutely objective. And I don't mean that data aren't objective. Data can really help us in having photographs of the situation and in seeing situations, but there are humans behind data inevitably. And I think that, and also this is why I want to use text, for instance, to show declare my intervention. I decided to select some countries. I decided to show you some data, but there are more. But I also think that using these soft shapes can also helps me remind that the data are not neutral objects that comes from an abstract point from the sky, but they are data that have been collected by people or by machines that have people behind them. And yes, they represent a picture, but the picture can change over time and can evolve. And so data are not like set in stone. And it's also a reason why I use such shapes that are not set in stone either, visually are more soft and organic. Yes, it's definitely something I think of.
Thank you. It's so nice. What you think is really there. It's very concrete. It's very rational at some point. It's not like you are, and you made me think. Sorry, I'm talking too much, maybe, but you made me also think that, I mean, as designers, or like the design educators, we are doing too many things at the same time. I mean, you're focusing only about how can I communicate this data better, let's say, not the narrative part, but just communicate, let's say. And then there is a UX UI designer, there are other people that can be helping you with how this project can expand in a website or a printed or whatever. But what you are focusing, I think you are very, in that sense, specialist, and you really define yourself very well, and you dig that, and you define your work yourself. And also, it's not only with the collaborative works, but what you want to do. Sorry, what sorry, I couldn't say. You're not only getting job from outside, but also you are doing something with what you want to say, a mouth to the world as well. So But really what fascinates me most is that you are in this world where there is this multidiscipline and everybody has to do many things at the same time. You find your niche and you are going deep into that and you collaborate good. I mean, that was what I could see. If it was your choice or I don't know. But I think that can say something to the students as well, because there are too many software around there. They want to do everything. And maybe sometimes it's good to step back and try to understand what I am doing and maybe make it deeper. I don't know if you want to say a few words about this. I mean, that was what I could see, but I'm not sure, of course.
Yeah, no, it's true. So when I started freelancing, I already had some experience of this job. And I thought at first, okay, now that I'm starting to freelance, I also want to take some time to learn how to code, for instance, because I don't know how to code. And I know that it's better to know how to code right now at the moment if you're a designer too. And I wanted to take courses, for instance, but I simply didn't have time. And in my spare time, I also like to do other things and not only work, or working on projects that are really deep, are important to me. And so I started collaborating with developers. I also do some UX, UI, and visual design sometimes, but I think that the projects that I'm fond of the most are the result of a collaboration. And I learned to understand that in my case, it worked very well. I really wanted to focus a lot on something and then to collaborate with people who are super talented and super excellent in something else. So the developer I work with two developers. One is Alex Piacentini, is also a designer, and the other one is Paolo Corti. He's a developer, creative developer, and he's incredibly talented. For me, it's better at the moment to work on people who can do something brilliantly rather than try to do it myself. And I know that the result will be very different. So yes, it's something I don't know, in 5 years, I will necessarily have to learn how to code. And then in that case, I will say, okay, let's do it. But at the moment, if I can choose, and luckily at the moment I can choose, I prefer to focus on something and then work on people who can do other things very, very in an excellent way. And for me, I really enjoy working this way with people who are more competent than me in other fields and to combine our expertise.
No, this is a brilliant answer, because also like this competence as well. It shouldn't be something like, maybe sometimes people are forced to be the coders, designers, and everything because there is a coder that you cannot collaborate with. And so you try to solve everything by yourself and so on. But that would be the perfect, like, if they're very competent in what they do and you collaborate, then I think the result would be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and my overall, sorry, just to add, I already mentioned it, but my first advice for collaborating is being direct and honest to each other. The projects that for me went worse with clients were the ones which the clients weren't communicating with me in an honest way, and while the advantage for me of working with these two collaborators they're also friends of mine, and that we can say each other things in a very direct and spontaneous way. And this is very important, not being afraid to offend anyone, because you can see things you don't agree with without offending anyone, of course. Always being respectful between each other, but being in a direct relationship and saying things as they are. I think it's very, very important for collaboration.
Thank you very much for the tip as well, because I know the students are watching also, so this is very important. Well, okay, if there are any further questions, we can finalize our talk. Okay, I think, okay, yes, there are thanks going on. Chichek is the program coordinator for the talks and panels. She's saying, thank you for the mind-opening presentation. I'm reading these because in the YouTube channel, we will lose all these words in the Zoom chat. So that's why I'm reading them. This was really a wonderful presentation, mind-opening presentation, and so we would love to host you sometime in Izmir. Hopefully we can talk about it. Thank you so much again for being part of this event, Good Design Izmir event. We hope that you enjoyed it as well yourself. Good to be here, and we look forward to other further collaborations, let me say, and to see you here. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the attendees, participants, for the talk.
Sure, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank
I
you.
hope to see you in person.
We hope you too. Okay, there is also